Tarry here, where the stories never grow old, and you hear something new every time they are told, and it comes clear. So tarry here, where it doesn't matter your age, and when we gather round the table, we all take the stage year after year. So tarry here.
Welcome to the Enlighten Radio Storytelling Hour at enlightenradio.org. I'm Fanny Crawford.
And I'm Stas Siokowski. And may I say, Fanny, you look lovely this morning. I like it. The sweater you're wearing is very nice.
On the radio.
Well, I can see you, so.
That's true. We're on Zoom. But thank you. That was very kind of you. Thank you. This is one of my favorite sweaters.
Very nice.
Today is Monday, January 12th. Holy cow. And our theme today is Hope in Troubled Times.
Hope in troubled times. That's very good. So, that was good. Holy cow. Maybe we should have that as a theme someday.
Just yesterday, it was September. So,
Isn't that amazing?
It is amazing.
Because it does seem like that. And even though we know it's not, but it's kind of weird. Anyway, it is a nice day here. The sun isn't quite blasting the sky yet, but a light blue sky, and it's nice and chilly. And here it is, Monday the 12th. So, did you have a good week?
It was way too busy
Well,
to be really nice, but I had bits of fun.
that
That
sounds like fun. Bits of fun. That would be a title, maybe a title for a store or a show.
Or a theme.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that could be too. But
well, what would you like to talk about, Mr. Z?
well, it's things are going fine here. We do have lots of things going on in the building, lots of activities, lots of meetings, and many discussions.
Happy meetings or
Well,
problematic meetings?
not terrible. I'm looking forward to the next group meeting I go to that involves inviting people to talk about things in the building and stuff like that. Because I'm going to implore all of my fellow residents who attend things, especially performances. Many people here have no idea of if a performance begins at 2:00, that they should be here sometime before 2:00.
Yes.
Not
a lot of people do not understand that.
Well, I'm going to say it is ignorant and like little children who just stroll around and come in after a person has begun. We had a guest storyteller here a couple days ago who was an older gentleman who is working on a book about Robert Frost and his gardener.
Wow.
Which is a true story. And he appeared as Mr. Frost's gardener in character, reminded me of somebody else I know performing in character. Had a wonderful New England voice, and I love the way he pronounced some words. And what he did was, though he's new to the idea of storytelling, and this is not a criticism, only a comment. He is not comfortable yet with the material, um, so he was reading it behind a podium that was not like a regular podium. It had a kind of I want to say a blanket-like material over top of something that was covering what he was reading, keeping it covered from the audience. But he read beautifully. He did not stutter and lose his place and stuff like that. And he would mention Robert Frost's poem that Robert Frost wrote lots of poems, and he would say, and then this area I'm talking about was covered by a poem that Mr. Frost wrote, and so and so, and he would step away from the podium and pick up a book that is a collection of Robert Frost poems, and he had them, with a little tag on them, and open it up and read the poem beautifully. And afterwards, I had met him before the performance, and afterwards went up and shook his hand and told him how much I enjoyed it. And he said something to the effect, "I doubt that you do your stories like I do." And I said, "No, I don't read, unless I have a specific bit of information, like if I was reading an article from the newspaper about a specific event or something, maybe, but usually I never read anything." And I said, "But your performance was really nice and people liked it." And I said, though, you probably noticed the audience perked up a bit when you moved away from the podium, even though you were reading from the book. And I said, that's, I think, if I would just tell you one thing about what you did, when you move a bit and you make eye contact with different parts of the audience, it really makes a difference. And, so, and he was very nice, very appreciative. And I wrote a thing for our
Newsletter.
like our local newsletter, a comment, because the activity director asked me to tell her what I thought of it, and I praised him. I thought he did a really nice job, and there was a different kind of presentation because it was very almost like a lecture, but people liked it. There were only two men in the room, and I think that was because of the topic. You know, us creatures of a certain gender. Poetry is kind of like foreign to us. I'm including. I'm using us because I am a male also, which I love poetry and everything, but I can't say, since I was only one of the two men in the room, I'm going to have to say that there was not a great attendance by men, and that's generally because poetry and men are like, "Oh my God, I went to a bar and was having a drink, and some guy told a poem. I thought I was going to die. Thought it was in the wrong place." Generally that's the typical thought about men and poetry. Not all men, of course. But I have there's another performance by another storyteller coming up next. Uh, let's see, this coming Saturday. I believe it's Saturday, and that is a Vietnam veteran who has been working on I guess on the moth stuff. He travels for moth.
Mm-hmm.
Tells, and I got the impression from reading the write up about him that he tells the same story wherever he goes. And I think that's not unheard of for people that work with the moth. They have a solid storytelling, and it has to do. I've read quite a lengthy write up about his story. Is It has to do with his experience as a young soldier, which is horrible, of course, in Vietnam, and then his experience coming home, which for many of those men was horrible because people threw things at him, spit at him, called them baby killers, and all this stuff. Um, and the soldiers did not deserve that, because even though there were some abuses during the Vietnam War, it certainly wasn't, you know, widespread throughout all the thousands of soldiers that were there. Um, I'm I wonder how that's going to be received here. You know, and I'm so, and of course I'll attend it because I always can learn. The lady who does the activities came to me about 2 weeks ago, or more than that, a month ago, and she said, "I have some news about storytelling," and and she was, I said, "Are you replacing me? What, you're getting rid of me?" She said, "No, but I've invited two gentlemen who wrote to me, and um, you know," I said, "So what's the problem? You seem up." She said, "Well, I don't want you to think I was um, ignoring you or anything like that, you know, because you're a resident storyteller, and I want you to know that." And I said, "Listen, storytellers aren't afraid of storytellers. We love other storytellers. That helps us to get ideas, and you know." And I said, "It's nice to see someone from the same, you know, crowd." I said, I will love meeting storytellers, and you know, we like to learn from each other and like to be part of that group." So, and that really pleased her, because she was, I guess probably in the past she's gotten somebody barked at her because she invited somebody in who was similar to the other, you know, another magician or something. I don't know.
We need to get over
Anyway,
that.
yeah, and I'm working on my presentation for my monthly presentation for next week, which is going to be about the Nobel Prize medals. And in fact, I was going to talk about that today a little bit, if that's
Good.
okay. Um, the I've told that story about Niels Bohr a number of times in performances. I've never talked about the medals,
Hmm.
I mean, as such. So I'm going to do a little bit about the medals. The concierge desk is so good here, especially a couple of people I've gotten to know real well. I can go down and say, "Hey, I have a picture that I'd really like a copy of. Think you could, you know, help me out, get it to your computer so that," and which is really nice. And a young man by the name of Noah, who often works on um, some evenings, is great at that. You know, he'd just say, "Okay, here, do this, do this, do this." I send him an email, and I stand there and have a chocolate bar or something while he's while he
I'm shocked.
well, the one nice thing about visiting the concierge desk, which is wide open, it's in a corner when you enter the building, but you know, it's easily accessible from all directions. Is they have two jars sitting on their I forget what was that called. You know,
Counter?
the counter. There you go. Boy, thank goodness you got words. And and they have two of these glass jars which are kept full. I mean, every morning you go there, they're full of
Right.
lots of little things, Hershey kisses and stuff. And
Okay.
so,
Well,
all right.
how about if I start us off?
I think it's a good idea, or else I'll talk all day.
Well, it's fine for you to talk all day, but we should get a story in there somewhere.
Yes, okay.
Okay. Well, I think most of our listeners who've been with us before have probably heard my great grandfather, Thomas Henry Barnes, T.H. Barnes, speaking and telling stories on this radio show. So let me invite great grandpa T.H. to sit down and tell us a story. Good afternoon. My name is Thomas Henry Barnes, called TH by my family. I see you there, Mr. Z,
Oh,
on this little screen, and I'm happy to see you again. Thank you for inviting me.
good to see you, Mr. Barnes.
Thank you, and I might get to hear one of your stories too today. Well, I want all of the listeners to know that I'm called TH by my family, or occasionally Tommy by the city fathers of Olean, New York, where I live. But I want to thank you and Mr. Z and my great granddaughter, whose name has just flown out of my head again. I have 17 grandchildren, and I cannot tell you how many great grandchildren I have, but I cannot remember most of their names. She'll be back, and then I'll probably remember it. But I am honored to be here, knowing that you have some interest in my 92 years of history. Well, I generally start my stories introducing my father, Henry, a dark-skinned man born enslaved near Richmond, Virginia, about 1818, we think. Now, Henry's memory of his parents was hazy. He had very little knowledge of them. Purchased as a child, as he was, by a wealthy English-born resident of Hagerstown, Maryland, a man calling himself Reverend Barnes, who came to Virginia to buy enslaved colored men and boys. Now, contrary to custom at the time, Reverend Barnes educated his enslaved workmen to read, write, calculate, and had them learn the skilled trade so he might lease them out to his neighbors around Washington County, Maryland. And their education allowed them to track the hours worked, the tasks accomplished, and bring those records back to Reverend Barnes that he might charge his customers for the work that was done. Now, those colored boys and men were the unpaid source of Reverend Barnes' considerable wealth. My father had a difficult time in Hagerstown to start, taken so young from his family, but he was educated there and trained as a gardener and seed man. In time, he became very good at his work and took pride in it. When his skills and experience, today you might call him a horticulturalist. He would never have called himself that, but that is how I came to think of him once I understood just what he was capable of accomplishing in his own and other people's gardens. Now, about the year 1835, Reverend Barnes called his 19 enslaved workmen to his bedside middle of the night. He said they had served him well. Now he was dying, and he determined to release them from bondage. He presented them each with $200 in cash and their manumission papers, free papers. They must leave his home that night, taking horses and wagons from the stable and leaving those across the Maryland state line in Pennsylvania with the man that he had arranged. Now, those 19 men were valued for each of them at more than $1,500 apiece on the slave market. And with the cash he gave them, they represented the bulk of his estate. Reverend Barnes believed that in the morning when his his heirs learned what he had done, they would march to the courthouse and find a judge to have Reverend Barnes declared insane and incompetent. For what man in his right mind would give away that fortune? For that reason, and the fact that the fugitive slave law was enacted, I think 1793, meant that bounty hunters, slave owners, and heirs of incompetent or recently deceased slave owners could and did routinely seize fugitives and too often freedmen on the streets and roads of the United States. Reverend Barnes instructed the 19 to hasten north to Canada. He asked each man to take the name Barnes. Well, they quickly agreed to that, and they set off in the night. And daybreak found the fugitives over the Pennsylvania line, relinquishing horses and wagons. Some of the men used the money given them to purchase conveyance north, but most set out on foot. Lewistown, Pennsylvania, Mifflin County, was a known station on the Underground Railroad. Now, I think your listeners, Mr. Z, will all know this, but there was no train connected to the Underground Railroad. The Underground Railroad was the fanciful term for the informal system of safe houses across the country that assisted enslaved men, women, and children seeking emancipation. In Lewistown, the men were overtaken by a posse of marshals, bounty hunters, and the old man's heirs who searched the town house by house, field by field, and all but 2 of the men escaped north. My father Henry and his friend Jerry Barnes were protected by the townsfolk. Jerry was hidden down a water well, and Henry secreted under a barn. For almost 2 days, they remained in hiding until finally the searchers moved on in pursuit of the rest, and the 2 men were released from their hiding places. Their protectors examined their manumission papers, found them in good order, and learning they were more literate than a good percentage of the townsfolk, and in fact were skilled tradesmen. They were invited to settle in the town and quickly found employment. Henry eventually married a free-born local mulatto woman, Jane Williams, and together they started our family. 5 children, though only myself and my brother Peter survived beyond 5 years. Now, before that, when Henry was taken from his Virginia home, a woman he remembered as his mother gave him a small child-sized quilt to carry away with him when he was taken from her as a boy. And my father told me she gave him that quilt so that he would remember where he came from. My father also said that Reverend Barnes, though releasing him when the old man was on his deathbed, was a cold-hearted exploiter of colored men and boys, and that the gifts of education and the skilled trade were 2 of the greatest gifts of my father's life, gifts that helped make him a responsible and successful businessman and family man in his adopted community. So while my father struggled for the early part of his life to figure out how he was going to be, how he was going to manage himself and not be overcome by anger and hatred, he focused on gratitude for the gift that he had been given, because as he looked around him, there were a lot of people like him who had no such education or training. And I'm going to stop there because Her name's Fanny. That's her name, Fanny Jean, my great granddaughter. And she said I shouldn't go on too long. So I have a lot more to tell, but I am told that I should take turns. So I think it's your turn, Mr. Zielkowski.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Barnes. Uh, I knew you would come up with her name. How, how could you couldn't forget her forever, that smiling, beautiful face, right? And she's always so nice and pleasant.
They're,
Well,
they are all nice. All of my 17 grands and umpteen teen great grands, they're all nice to me. That doesn't mean I can put the faces with the names. It's getting harder.
it's it's getting harder. I understand completely. I live in a building with, I believe it's either 98 or 101 other uh, older people. And I am not, even though I am of a certain age, I am nowhere near the top of the list as far as age. We have a gentleman here who runs our poker game twice a week. It's called JD's poker game, and he is 96 years old. He's confined to a motorized wheelchair, which he operates very well. And he has I love this word. I haven't used it for many years until until recently. He has a bevy of young. Uh, he calls them his nurses, and I think just because I've gotten to know him, I think he only accepts a nurse helper if she's kind of very pretty. I get that impression because they're all young and very pretty, and treat him like he's a god on wheels. And um, he is quite a character. He's become a good friend, and it is nice to see that some of the healthcare system works so well for someone like JD, because he cannot walk at all. And yeah, I'd love to take a ride in his chair sometime, but I'm not going to tell him that. And also, I actually don't envy him being restricted to the chair. You know, I, I have enough trouble with having to use a walker all over the place. But anyway, um, I lost my train of thought.
You were going to tell us the story.
Okay. Well, I am fascinated by the title we had, Hope, and there's always hope for a better day. One of the famous people of history that, because of my education as becoming a chemistry teacher and a person interested in science, as a young person, I heard the name Alfred Nobel, and I heard about the Nobel Prizes. And as a young person, as a child, and then as a teenager, I didn't think too much about them because there were all kind of prizes and talk about gold medals. And my main interest as a teenager, of course, was not in something academically inclined. It had to do with sports. And of course, I envied um, and desired and dreamed of maybe one day winning a gold medal in the Olympics, which is, I forget the name that my father mentioned to me once. It had to do with, I don't, I'm wish I could remember that name, but it was like it translated into a child's foolish dream, or maybe a foolish child's dream. And my father said, you're not going to win any gold medals in the Olympics. Um, you haven't, you haven't, um, you haven't the body of an athlete. You don't have the size of an athlete, and unless you grow another 6 or 8 inches, I think you'd have to be in the mini Olympics. That was his little joke because I was the shortest person in the family. I had two brothers and a sister, and I was taller than my sister and my mother, but that was not any great achievement on my part. So anyway, Alfred Nobel was a man who invented dynamite, and this was in the early 1800s. And as he went through his life, he was very disturbed by his creation because it was a weapon of war, a weapon used, first of all, strictly thought of as a powerful explosive that could help in mining and in engineering in some ways of taking down large blocks of a certain kind of hill or mountain or something to clear the way for roads to be developed and for things to be cleaned out so that the space was usable. However, dynamite became a weapon of war. And because of that, Alfred Nobel, as he aged, suffered in his mind about what he had brought into the world. And near the time of his death, as he aged and knew he was near the end of his life, he wrote in his will that he wanted the money that he had to be invested and put aside as a fund to award people who had done good things for humanity. And so in the year 1901, after Nobel had passed in the 1890s, it took 5 years for this promise to come into being. The Nobel Institute was set up in 1900, and the first Nobel Prizes were announced in 1901. And the Nobel Prize for an individual who has done something exceptional in their field that will benefit mankind. The first part of that is a gold medal. And the original gold medals were made of 24 karat gold. And they went on until 1979. In 1979, the gold medals, the pure gold medals, were replaced by 18 karat gold, which was very nice, but made up of mostly gold, a little bit of silver, small bits of copper. And then that metal was coated, completely coated on all sides with 24 karat gold. So not only were the recipients who received the gold medal for their achievements and their contribution to mankind, not only did they receive a gold medal, which was worth a lot of money, they also received a bequest from his money that was put aside for this, that nowadays in this modern world exceeds $1 million, and which is an incredible, and it's a free gift. It's for that person to use as they see fit. Well, the gold medals have increased over the years. The original gold medals, the Nobel Prizes, were designed to award people in the area of the pure sciences. And so over the years, the Nobel Prize medals have become a total of 5 different medals. And I say different because they are in different fields. The original field was for pure scientists, chemistry and physics. And each of the medals is designed with Alfred Nobel's image on the front of the medal. There are very few pictures of Nobel. He died in the late 1800s, and he wasn't a showman or something like that. But the gold medals each have his likeness on the front side. And they also have the dates of his birth and his death. And the interesting thing is, if you get a chance to see a picture of one of these, or if you ever got to see the real, an actual gold Nobel Prize medal, you would see that the dates are written in Roman numerals. And it is quite an interesting thing to see the date of his birth in Roman numerals, because it's 1833. And I'm not going to say it on the during the radio program, but if you take a look into your background of schooling and sat down and wrote the year 1833 in Roman numerals, in the way we write dates now, that's only 4 numbers. In Roman numerals, it comes out to be a long string of letters. And it took me a little while to figure out whether I could have written that one without looking at the string. I think I could, but I wouldn't have bet a nickel on it. Anyway, the 5 different medals are exactly the same in the front with Nobel image on it. On the reverse side, each of the different medals has each of the 5 different medals that are awarded by the institutes have different pictures. The science medals for physics and chemistry have a picture of the goddess resembling Isis emerging from the clouds and holding in her arms a cornucopia. And the veil which covers her cold and austere face is held up by the genius of science. The medal for the Nobel Assembly at the Karolinska Institute, that takes care of the medal for medicine, has the genius of medicine holding an open book in her lap, collecting water pouring out from a rock in order to quench a sick girl's thirst. The third medal represents a young man sitting under a laurel tree who is enchanted and listens to and writes down the song of the muse. The 4th gold medal is the one for the designated for the Nobel Peace Prize. And the Nobel Peace Prize is given in a different way than the others for the medals for science, for medicine, for literature. A person is singled out for their body of work or their discovery that benefits mankind. And although there may be more than one person thought of and discussed to receive that award, there is a group for each of those medals that decides based on the accomplishment. The Nobel Peace Prize medal has represents on the medal itself on the back. There is a group that represents 3 men forming a fraternal bond. The Nobel Peace Prize medal has, over the years, caused some great discussion about whether the person receiving the medal really deserved it more than someone else or this and that. It is the only Nobel award that is discussed at length sometimes because people disagree on the choice. However, it doesn't matter whether people like the choice or not, because the group of men who decide that, group of people, okay. And finally, there is a gold medal for the field, a field that has to do with banking and not banking, but economic sciences, and that is that has a different design. No people on that on the reverse side. It's the bank crossed horns of plenty, and that design distinguishes it from the medals of the 5 prizes awarded under the terms of Alfred Nobel's 1895 will, because there are no people on the backside of that. So there are 5 separate awards each year: one for physics and chemistry, one for physiology or medicine, one for literature, one for peace, and one for the economic sciences. And the one for economic sciences, I believe, is the newest one. So, and an interesting discussion that often comes up about the Nobel medals is that more Nobel Prizes are awarded to humans of the Jewish faith than of any other group. And it is not, if you were counting the numbers, there's not even a close competition. And it is quite a discussion. Been going on for a number of years now about why is that true. And people have all kind of personal thoughts about that, but it is, as a matter of fact, quite true that more people who are Jews, and it's not so much that anybody is a practicing member of the Jewish faith. It's people who are born into Jewish families. So it has to do with the genetics in some cases, and lots of people argue about this. That Jews are better students, they're more focused, they're raised by families that are more interested in accomplishing something, and all kind of discussions. However, the outcome is there you are. The numbers don't lie. And so this is one of those things that people, I'm sure there are a lot of discussions about this, but you look at the numbers and the numbers will tell you that the statement is true. And that's my background about the Nobel Prizes and the Nobel gold medals. There are lots of interesting things that have happened to gold medals. They can't be. It's frowned on if you would try to sell a Nobel Prize medal, or if you would try to do, trade it for something. However, over the years, there have been instances, and in my presentation coming up in a couple of weeks, I will discuss what happens to some gold medals during the Second World War, which is an interesting science story.
So what do you think the impact of the whole Nobel Peace Prize process has been? Do you think it has helped with the troubles in the world? Do you think
Well,
it's
I do think it is. I do think that for the people in those 5 fields, it certainly has helped. As a person as a chemist, as a person who worked in research and taught chemistry, it certainly puts a mark on a person and establishes the fact that they have done wonderful work and have developed something or discovered something or created something that has helped mankind. And that was what Nobel was trying to, as he approached death, he was trying to figure a way, how could he make amends to humanity for his terrible creation, this weapon of war, destruction. And it has helped a lot of people, because scientists who have won the Nobel Prize, given the money that they can continue their research independently, they don't have to rely on someone, on a university or some business. They have the money then to continue their research and to promote the good that it does. The Peace Prize is often, there's a discussion, but the people who have won the Peace Prize have done something to help the world in a sense, in a large sense, to recognize that peace is important, and that war should not be our way of settling differences. Unfortunately, we still have wars going on. Fanny, okay, come in.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start on the next part of my story.
Okay.
But that was a really good example of something that has made a difference. Thank you for sharing
All
that.
right. And I'm going to leave our broadcast early today because
Okay, can you give me a time check?
I will give you, we have been on the air for 46 minutes.
Okay.
All right.
Fair enough. Yes.
I'll talk to you during the week.
Okay.
Thank John for me. Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, I'm going to continue with our show. Inviting my great-grandfather, Thomas Henry Barnes, back to the microphone. Thank you, Fanny Jean. I even remembered your second name, not just your first name. I thought I was doing pretty well there. Well, was talking about my father, Thomas Henry Barnes, and now I'm going to switch gears and talk a bit about my mother and her impact on my overall ability to function in the world and cope with difficult times. My mother, Jane, was the politician in the family, and though her schooling was very limited, she was a natural mathematician, wonderful memory of dates, details, names. She was enthusiastic on the subjects of education, politics, and temperance. That is, the dangers of addictions of all kinds. And she was well posted on the national questions of the time. My mother, Jane, was descended from African, Dutch, and Native American or Indian stock, farmers, all of them, black and white. Her mother was one of 13 sisters born to a Mr. Cooper, Couper, Cooper, a Dutch farmer, and his wife, who was a Native American woman he met and married in New York State. So Mrs. T.H. Barnes, my own dear wife, had also an interesting background. Her father died young, and her mother became a maid on an Ohio and Missouri River steamboat. Now, Marybelle, Mrs. Barnes, was raised by her grandparents, Mr. and Mrs. John Lott, who was a teamster. He had been in the import-export business in Haiti, but he'd settled in oil country in central Pennsylvania when I met him in the early 1870s, where he was running several mule teams hauling crude oil. You know, you'll have to invite me back again, Fanny Jean, to have me tell about some of our escapades, Mr. Barnes, Mr. Lott, and I, as I courted his granddaughter. But I want to just talk about my mother here. So I'm a bit off my topic, which is supposed to be my early years in education for this story. I attended a small, dilapidated one-room school with no books and almost nothing passing for educational supplies, but I did learn the rudiments of reading. At that time, with my father's assistance, I learned to read at least as well as any other student of any age in that schoolhouse. Now, Mother was determined that I should have a clear understanding of the world around me, and it is to her I owe my curiosity about people and life in general. She daily shared with me the secrets of mathematics and the importance of reading books if available, but mostly newspapers, the Lewistown Gazette, and other small publications of our community. Now, Mother did not read well, just enough to sound out the major headlines. Young as I was, I saw and heard much that deeply interested me, and Mother and I had many conversations based on the questions I would ask. She taught me to listen to the words of others, to attend to their actions and try to make sense of the needs and desires motivating men, women, and yes, children around us. And she gave me my first lesson in politics, making me a perpetual Republican. Now later, of course, President Abraham Lincoln, one of the earliest of that party, sealed my commitment as a Republican. I have a vivid memory, though, of watching the parades with my brother Peter during the election campaigns of 1856, so before the Civil War. Brass bands, banners flying, throwing my cap in the air. "Make a joyful noise, Tommy," were mother's instruction. And the Republican marchers in that parade threw large copper cents to us as they waved, passing our gate. These were the supporters of the former Vice President Millard Fillmore, now running for president. And Mother explained these men supported schools for colored people, many willing to speak out for abolition of slavery throughout the country. Days later, Mother forced me and Peter into the house, locked the doors, drew the curtains as the second procession passed. I tried to remain by the window to observe, but Mother pulled me back as derisive epithets and showers of stones were hurled at our front door. Mother explained these marchers were Southern sympathizers who wrote in the newspapers that colored people were not human and deserved neither education nor citizenship. She bade me look around at our hardworking, kind, generous colored neighbors for evidence to the contrary. James Buchanan, Democrat, was elected, of course, in that election. And as he was born and raised in Franklin County, Pennsylvania, our local newspaper reported almost everything he said or did. Well, not like today in 1942, with newsreels and the radio replaying speeches every evening. But I listened to my father read to my mother the new president's inauguration speech in the paper, and the president's assurance that the issue of slavery in the new Western territories would soon be resolved. That did not end well. I knew those names as a child: Millard Fillmore versus James Buchanan. And then I started hearing the fear and anger in people's voices when they said another name, Mr. Dred Scott, and wrote and spoke about the Supreme Court decision that slavery could not be prohibited in the new Western territories. That was linked to the decision that slaves have no standing in court, regardless of the wrongs that may have been perpetrated on them: kidnapping, torture, even murder. Those election parades, the political hullabaloo, is still so vivid to me these 85 years later. It was likely the start of my interest in politics and history, and my mother's enthusiasm for teaching me the lessons of history and politics remain. That's a beacon of my mother's concern for my education and place in our community, rich with examples of the power of leaders to galvanize ordinary citizens for right or for wrong. Well, the hard part of the story comes because my father died when I was but 8 years old. Quick consumption, or you would say pneumonia. Now, perhaps working outdoors winter and summer, barely any accommodation for foul weather or health emergencies contributed to his early death at 39 years old. Mother had a difficult time then. She was ill herself more than a year and lived just 3 years without father. The night she died, Mother gone, I well understood we were orphans, Brother Peter and myself. And her last words to me were, "Be a good boy, as I taught you. Take care of your brother." We were rescued by family friends who telegraphed to Mother's brother, beloved Uncle Peter, his wife, Aunt Caroline, with our cousins Lizzie and Sadie, who came and took me and Peter to live with them in Brooklyn, New York. The difficulty there was, though cousin Lizzie, a diligent and talented music student, and my witty and fun-loving cousin Sadie were accepted in the local white school, they were light complexion, while Peter and myself were obviously colored children, unacceptable to that school. Brooklyn, mostly rural at the time, had no other options. Uncle Peter consulted with his good friend, Dr. James McCune Smith. Dr. Smith was awarded a medical degree from the University of Edinburgh in Scotland and became the first Negro on the New York City Board of Health and the presiding physician at the New York Colored Orphans Asylum. On his advice, Uncle Peter enrolled us in that educational institution across the Hudson River in Manhattan as half orphans at $1.50 per child each week, giving Uncle Peter the option to bring us home when convenient. And so we were cared for. Peter and I, we were taken in by our extended family and educated at this wonderful Quakerone institution. And I'm going to end there because I believe we're out of time for this radio show. But it was these experiences following tragedies or losses that I experienced, the people around me reassuring me and caring for me and helping me to see what my own gifts were and are, so that I just never became completely overwhelmed by loss or sadness, and have been able to make something of myself, I would say, as a small businessman in a small town. I'm going to turn it back over to that girl and let her close out this radio show. I believe that's what she's waiting for. Thank you, great-grandfather. This is Fanny Crawford, thanking our listening audience, both for myself and great-grandpa Thomas Henry Barnes, and Stash Silkowski, who had to leave early for an appointment. We've been your co-hosts for the Enlighten Radio Storytelling Hour today at enlightenradio.org. We're independent community radio broadcasting from Bolivar, West Virginia, Hagerstown, Maryland, and while Stash Silkowski was with us from Salt Lake City, Utah. But that's the end of this week's show. Offering you, our listeners, a window into the world of storytelling by traditional and non-traditional tellers, encouraging our listening community to share, preserve, and expand all of our stories. I want to thank Andy Offit Irwin for opening the show today, and John Case. And he's going to tell you what's up next.
Oh, I'm playing tributes to Bobby Weir today.
Right.
Last standing, well, no longer standing member of the Grateful Dead, and a generous soul, to be truthful. So anyway, that's probably it as far as